are in listen-only mode.
Thank you. All right, Chair, we're ready to go.
Okay. Good afternoon. Today is meeting one of the California Transportation Commission meeting for January 27th to 28th, 2021. This is our first meeting of 2021. Welcome, everyone. Douglas, could you please read the roll and provide instructions for public comment today?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Alvarado.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Burke.
Here.
Commissioner Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Eager.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Guardino.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Inman.
Here.
Commissioner Kehoe.
Here.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you. Commissioner Liu.
Here.
Commissioner Martinez.
Present.
Commissioner Tavaloni.
Here.
Chair Norton.
Present.
Assemblymember Friedman. I believe we're expecting Assemblymember Friedman a little later. Madam
At
Chair, we have
2:30, yes.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum. Thank you.
Wonderful. And
For-
Douglas, could you please read the instructions for public comment?
Will do. Welcome to the January 2021 CTC virtual meeting. Please note, because this is a two-day meeting, you will need to use a separate link to attend the meeting tomorrow. The links can be found on the first page of the meeting agenda on our website. Please use the questions tab in the webinar service if you have questions about meeting logistics. Commissioners, should you have any questions or comments during the meeting, please let us know by turning your camera on, and we will call on you in the order we see you. You can also send questions or comments through the questions tab, and staff is happy to read those for you as needed. Please mute your microphone except when you intend to speak to minimize outside noise and feedback. We will do our best to call on you, each of you in turn. We hope that you will turn your cameras on when speaking if you have one. Because this meeting is not an in-person meeting, every vote will need to be a roll call vote. Staff will group items for votes to help save time. Please only speak when you are called upon. When called upon, please state your name and briefly make your point. We would ask that no one speak a second time on any one motion or any one item until all commissioners who wish to speak a first time have had an opportunity to do so. For our presenters, if you're on the agenda to make a presentation, please do your best to be succinct. We hope that you will also turn on your camera during your presentation if you have one. For the members of the public, we welcome comments from the public. For participants joining us through the GoToWebinar system, please find the webinar panel likely located on the right-hand side of your screen. There you will find the audio, questions, and handouts tab. Under the audio tab, attendees will have the choice to listen via the computer or telephone option. Should you prefer the computer option, please ensure the appropriate box is selected. If you choose the phone call option, please select the corresponding box and dial the phone number, access code, and audio pin as directed by the automated system. Please note that if the audio pin is not entered, you will remain in listen-only mode and will be unable to speak to the commission should you have a comment. As a reminder, each registered attendee is provided a unique link and phone number to access the webinar. These cannot be shared with other participants as they are registered to a specific attendee. There are two options to participate and provide comments on the agenda items. Use the questions tab, type the agenda number you are commenting on, and your comment. Commission staff will read the comment on your behalf. Alternately, you may click the hand icon to indicate you wish to make a comment. You will then be unmuted and called upon to make your comment. Please be sure you state your name and affiliation prior to voicing your remarks. Please do your best to be concise with your comments. Also, please make sure that your comments add new information. If you agree with the comments of a previous speaker, simply make that statement. Since we often have many speakers, we ask that you make your point in 3 minutes or less. If for some reason we have many speakers on a topic, we reserve the right to limit comments to 1 minute. You will not be able to be on camera while making comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Douglas. With that, we're going to proceed with our agenda, and our very first item is the election of commission chair and vice chair. Do we have any motions for the election of the commission chair?
Madam Chair, this is Commissioner Alvarado. I'd like to nominate Hillary Norton for chair.
Martinez.
Second.
Second the nomination. Commissioner Davis.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none. Douglas, could you please read the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is for Hillary Norton as chair. Commissioner Alvarado,
Yes.
Commissioner Burke,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Eager.
Yes, yes, and yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Guardino. Commissioner Guardino. Thank you. Commissioner Inman,
Yes.
Commissioner Kehoe,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez,
Aye.
Commissioner Tavaloni,
Yes.
Chair Norton.
Yes.
Congratulations, Chair. You're chair once more.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, colleagues. Appreciate it. And now with the election of vice chair, I'd like to
Madam
move
Chair, I'd
to.
like to move Bob Alvarado for vice chair if he's willing to serve another year.
Second, Commissioner Davis.
Fantastic. Are there any other nominations?
Tool directly in Salesforce that enables us to give more.
Are there any other nominations? If not, Douglas, could you please read the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Alvarado,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Burke,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Eager,
Yes.
Commissioner Guardino,
Aye.
Commissioner Inman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kehoe,
Aye.
Commissioner Liu,
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez.
Aye.
Commissioner Tavaloni,
You bet.
Chair Norton.
Aye. Congratulations.
The motion is approved.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And Douglas, could you please take tabs 3 through 5 together?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tab 3 is approval of the minutes from our December 2nd and 3rd, 2020 meeting of the Commission. Tab 4 is approval of minutes of the November 4th, 2020 joint meeting between the California Transportation Commission, Department of Housing and Community Development, and the California Air Resources Board. And tab 5 is the Commissioners' meeting for compensation. Staff recommends your approval.
Chairman
Great.
Norton, I would move those 3 items. Commissioner Davis.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis.
Commissioner Eager seconds.
Thank you. Douglas, could you please read the roll?
Commissioner Alvarado,
Yes.
Commissioner Burke,
Aye.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Eager,
Aye.
Commissioner Guardino,
Yes.
Commissioner Inman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kehoe.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Liu,
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez,
Aye.
Commissioner Tavaloni,
Aye.
Chair Norton.
Aye.
Chair, the motion is approved.
Wonderful. And with that, we'd like to have the presentation from Commission Executive Director Mitch Weiss.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'd like to start off by thanking everyone for attending our meeting virtually. With COVID-19 still prevalent in many of our communities, we will continue to work virtually for the foreseeable future. This coming March will mark 1 year that we've been working remotely and adapting to this new normal. While we've been able to conduct the work of the Commission virtually quite efficiently, we miss seeing everyone in person and look forward to the day that we can do that once again. I'd like to take a moment to congratulate the Commission's new ex officio member, Assemblymember Laura Friedman, who was appointed Chair of the Assembly Transportation Committee on December 12th. Chair Friedman has been a strong advocate for transportation equity, and we're happy to have her join the Commission as the Assembly's ex officio member. We expect that she will be joining us today at around 12:30, and we can welcome her then. I'd also like to take a moment to thank Assemblymember Jim Frazier for having served as an ex officio member of the Commission since 2015. Mr. Frazier was instrumental in the passing of SB 1 and also authored ACA 5, which the voters passed as Prop 69 to enshrine protections for SB 1 funds in the state constitution. I'd like to congratulate Nuria Fernandez of VTA and Steve Cliff of CARB for the recent US DOT appointments. Nuria Fernandez has been appointed as Deputy Director of the Federal Highway Transit Administration, and Steve Cliff has been appointed as Deputy Administrator of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. I hope everyone had the opportunity to attend the workshop we held this morning discussing homelessness in the transportation environment and safety project selection and funding. We heard from speakers from Union Pacific Railroad, Caltrans, and the County of Ventura. The workshop provided an opportunity for us to have an open discussion regarding these important issues, including information sharing and some of the successes and challenges that we're facing. The webcast of the workshop will be available online for those who did not have a chance to attend. I have a few upcoming meeting dates to note. On Friday, February 5th at 9:30, the Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee will meet. On Thursday, April 8th, we'll be hosting a joint meeting with CARB and HCD. And our April town hall that was scheduled to be in Tulare will be rescheduled to 2022. Looking ahead at our March meeting, we will be seeking commission approval of the 2021 Active Transportation Program funding recommendations for the statewide and small urban and rural components. We are scheduled to release staff recommendations by February 12th, so keep an eye out for them. We received many outstanding applications this cycle, but the unfortunate reality is that we only have funding for a relatively small number of projects because this program is severely underfunded. We need to obtain greater funding for future program cycles. To that end, we've been encouraging the legislature to use cap and trade funds to augment the program as was done in the past. We will continue to have these conversations to increase funding for this important program and hope that our partners and stakeholders will join us in this conversation. Commissioners, we continue to hear from our transit partners about the challenges they are facing. Chair Norton and Commission staff met with the California Transit Association earlier this month and discussed the federal funding relief package, the state of transit, and the needs of transit for the coming year. While the recent federal funding relief package, which will provide a much-needed $2 billion boost for California transit agencies, is passed, we still need to make sure that our federal partners understand that even more help is needed to get through these unprecedented challenges. We will hear more on these issues from the Transit Association at a future commission meeting. Next, I'd like to mention our racial equity statement, which is on our agenda today. From the Capitol riots to voting rights to healthcare and education, we cannot deny the disparities and inequities we are seeing that many face across our nation. Historically, some communities have benefited from the development of our statewide transportation system, while other communities have been knowingly burdened. The Commission is uniquely structured to either mitigate or exacerbate these inequities through the decisions about which projects to fund and what policy priorities to elevate. This racial equity statement is an important step for the Commission to take. This statement collectively reflects guidance and input from every commission. You will also hear later about a $912 million in federal COVID relief funds that California is expected to receive. These funds will be critical to backfilling the revenue losses from COVID-19. And I want to stress that backfilling revenue we lost, not new revenue. As we have been saying since the pandemic started almost a year ago, we've been fortunate not to have projects already underway affected by the revenue losses, but future projects would surely be affected absent federal relief funding. We're therefore grateful for this federal assistance and the federal government's allowance for these funds to be used to cover revenue losses. We will be scheduling a workshop in the very near future to discuss the distribution of these funds. Finally, I have a few staffing updates. Teresa Favila has been promoted to Deputy Director of STIP and ATP Programming. Teresa has worked for the Commission for 14 years. During her tenure, she has been responsible for many of the programs under the Commission's purview, including the STIP, the Solutions for Congested Corridors Program, Propositions 1B and 1A programs, and the Aeronautics Program. Teresa has been an invaluable member of our team throughout this time, and her promotion is well deserved. Matthew Yoscott has been promoted to Deputy Director of SB1 Programs. Matthew has worked as an Associate Deputy Director at the Commission for 2 years. He managed the Local Partnership Program, the Solutions for Congested Corridors Program, and has overseen the Commission's SB1 accountability and transparency responsibilities, and associated reporting efforts. Congratulations, Matthew, on a well-earned promotion. Finally, Assistant Deputy Director for Legislation and Finance, Julia Kingsley, will be leaving our staff on February 13th, having accepted a position with the Assembly Transportation Committee. In her time at the Commission, Julia made significant contributions to bolstering our legislative outreach efforts, developing our legislative policy issues and recommendations, and assisting with the rollout of our SB1 competitive program recommendations. We thank Julia for her service with the Commission and look forward to working with her in her new role. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Executive Director Weiss. It's now time for my report, and Executive Director Weiss's report was so thorough. There are just a few things I wanted to add on. I really do feel that 2021 is the year of infrastructure, and I want to thank my colleagues for your support of re-election of me and Commissioner Alvarado as Vice Chair, me as Chair, because we have so much to do and our momentum is so great. It bears repeating that in 2020, we as commissioners were able to move $22 billion worth of projects, 1,200 projects in total, which will equate to 350,000 jobs. As we are coming back from our COVID-19 pandemic this year, these jobs, this infrastructure will mean that lives are going to continue to be saved as we work on safety, access, environment, and as the freight continues to move, generating sales tax dollars that can help support transit funding as well. I thank the Commission also for the courage to talk about additional funding opportunities, like looking at cap and trade for the ATP program, since we knew that that was 5 times oversubscribed. Active transportation, as we've all found this year and last year, has been extremely important to us as we were moving around in our communities. We were being aware of how we were going to travel differently in COVID-19, and we were looking at the safety aspects of how that travel occurs. I want to welcome Senator Lena Gonzalez and Assemblywoman Laura Friedman, because as Laura Friedman is about to gain one of our great deputies, Julia Kingsley, we know that she has also been a stalwart activist for transportation of all kinds. And her work in the Assembly Transportation Committee is going to be extraordinary. She has already spoken about the things that she wants to do, as well as Senator Lena Gonzalez. We were very pleased to be part of a Mobility 21 reception for them both. And knowing where their vision is going is very, very exciting for us all. We're so excited about a federal partner in the Biden administration that cares about zero-emission vehicles, that cares about freight, that is going to fund transit as it needs to be, as Executive Director Weiss said. And interestingly, is talking about no gas tax reauthorization at higher amounts. So no cost of living increase and others. It reminds us the courage that our California elected officials had when creating SB1 and the seriousness by which we take our job being good stewards of those funds. Today's meeting with the racial equity statement and the equity roundtable and the equity listening sessions, we are so proud of this statement and the staff that helped put this together and the members of the equity roundtable that are leaning in to talk about how infrastructure can be good for all and equitable for all, and access can be so meaningful for all. And so we are looking forward to working on addressing inequities, to looking at new ways of delivering projects, and to take all of the aspects of our racial equity statement and live them out. In addition, today's workshop, to me, expressed the kind of infrastructure planning that we are going to be doing in this next year. And that was that as people were talking about homelessness, as people were talking about safety, I was very pleased to hear from the Caltrans representative, who was a woman who experienced homeless herself and whose mother was currently experiencing homelessness. It's that compassion, that lived experience, and that attention to safety and the humanity of people who are struggling through the COVID-19 pandemic that I think is a hallmark now of how we are going to operate, not only in the transportation arena, but as human beings, as Californians, bringing back our state with a full range of our humanity in addressing safety, equity, homelessness, and a new economy. It's exciting to be part of a California Transportation Commission that is on the move, and 2021 is going to be an extraordinary year together. I thank you very much, and I want to move on to CalSTA Secretary David Kim.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Madam Chair, Commissioners, Commission staff, and members of the public. Chair Norton, congratulations to you on your re-election as chair. Vice Chair Alvarado, congratulations to you. It's good news for all of us that both of you are remaining in your positions of leadership, and there's a lot to look forward to this year. As has been mentioned earlier, the Commission held a very informative workshop this morning on homelessness in the transportation environment. I had a chance to catch the first hour of it, and I thought it was an excellent overview by UP, Caltrans, and Ventura County. And I just want to applaud the Commission for hosting the workshop. Glad the Commission had a chance to hear from all of them and engage in dialogue on the many complex challenges in addressing homelessness from a transportation perspective. Also, as has been earlier noted, many changes in the legislature from a committee lineup standpoint. Assemblymember Jim Frazier ended his tenure as chair of Assembly Transportation and is now the new chair of the Assembly Governmental Organization Committee. And of course, he was ex officio on this commission for the past 5 years. And I just want to thank and acknowledge Chair Frazier for his enthusiastic and passionate leadership on so many issues that are important to all of us: traffic safety, maintaining state of good repair, rebuilding our infrastructure, creating jobs, and boosting the economy, among others. And it goes without saying that he was absolutely instrumental in getting SB 1 through the legislature and enacted into law. Without his leadership, we would simply not have the resources to move forward on critical investments, including transit and active transportation. Also want to congratulate Assemblymember Laura Friedman on being appointed as the new chair of Assembly Transportation. She is someone who brings tremendous experience and know-how when it comes to transit and rail. And we've also had a chance to work closely with her on something she cares about deeply, and that is promoting transportation safety for all users, especially pedestrians and bicyclists. Also, congratulations to Senator Lena Gonzalez as the new chair of Senate Transportation. She is the first Latina in more than 50 years to lead the committee. And I think it's really interesting to note that Senator Gonzalez is following in the footsteps of quite a few legislators from Long Beach who have played a prominent role on transportation issues. It's a very distinguished list. It includes people like Congressman and former State Senator Alan Lowenthal, former Assemblymember Bonnie Lowenthal, and former member of this commission, former Assemblymember Jenny Oropeza, former State Senator Betty Carnett, and former Congressman Glenn Anderson, whose name you see on the 105 freeway. All from Long Beach, all of them were known for their strong leadership on transportation, and Senator Gonzalez will continue that great tradition. And it's terrific that both Assemblymember Friedman and Senator Gonzalez will serve as ex officio members of the commission, and I look forward to seeing them virtually during our upcoming meetings. Finally, congratulations to Chanel Fletcher on her recent appointment as Deputy Executive Officer of Environmental Justice at CARB. Chanel has been an effective leader and partner in her most recent role as Executive Director of Climate Plan, and she's done a lot to make sure that all of us at CalSTA, CTC, and Caltrans do everything possible to deliver a more equitable and sustainable transportation system. Madam Chair, later in the meeting, Caltrans will give you an overview of the California Integrated Travel Project, otherwise known as CAL-ITP. This is a really important initiative that will transform the way in which transit riders pay for fares. In other words, digital, contactless, and cashless payment methods for all riders, including those who do not have bank accounts. The idea is that paying for transit should be as easy as buying a cup of coffee, and I'm glad to say we are well on our way to demonstrating this with transit partners around the state. Really excited about Cal ITP, and it's a great example of the kind of innovation we are taking and should be taking in order to make transit as user-friendly, convenient, and accessible as possible. Also later today, you're going to hear an update from Caltrans on the California Transportation Plan 2050. This is a long-range plan, a roadmap that will guide us in bringing about a safer, more resilient, and more accessible transportation system, and also one that supports vibrant communities, as well as advancing racial and economic justice and improving public and environmental health. Really glad to say the plan aligns well with the governor's direction to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from transportation and increase resilience to climate change, as well as other goals like improving safety, quality of life, economic growth, and accessibility. I want to note that CTP 2050 has been shaped by a lot of stakeholder input, and because of that, it is a comprehensive document with a strong vision. The plan's now going through final review and remediation, and we are eagerly looking forward to releasing it very soon, so stay tuned. Also, since the last commission meeting, we've seen major changes in Washington with a new administration, along with a shift in the balance of power on Capitol Hill, with the Senate majority changing hands and the House remaining under a Democratic majority. And from a transportation standpoint, I think there's good reason to be optimistic and energized. Infrastructure is a top priority for the new administration. In fact, during the campaign, you may have seen that then candidate Biden and his team developed a very granular transportation agenda that I found inspiring. So for example, the administration proposes big investments in rail and transit, including zero-emission transit, and it also calls for 500,000 new EV charging stations and sets a goal that all new American-built buses be zero-emission by 2030. All of this aligns well with the governor's executive order N7920. That's the one that came out in September, and it requires all new cars sold in California to be zero emission by 2035. And it also goes hand in hand with the governor's budget proposal, which includes $1.5 billion in investments for zero emission vehicles, electric charging stations, and hydrogen fueling stations. I've also liked what I've heard from President Biden's nominee for Secretary of Transportation, Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Last week, Secretary-designate Buttigieg told the US Senate during his confirmation hearing that America has a generational opportunity to transform the nation's infrastructure and also to pursue the president's goals on climate change, racial justice, job creation, and pandemic recovery. And I very much believe we have a generational opportunity to partner with the Biden administration to achieve our mutual goals in all of these areas. And just a few hours ago, the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee approved the nomination of Mayor Pete by a vote of 21-3. So he is one step away from becoming Secretary Pete. The last action will be a final vote before the full Senate, which will hopefully happen in the next few days. Also, I think it behooves all of us as state transportation leaders to look at upcoming policy and investment decisions through the lens of partnering and aligning with the federal government to achieve our shared goals. And as Mitch and others have mentioned, several prominent transportation leaders in California who are well known to us and have recently joined the Biden administration. Nuria Fernandez of Valley Transportation Authority is now a deputy administrator at FTA. And in this role, she's also serving as acting administrator. And Stephen Cliff of CARB, now a deputy administrator at NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. As I think many of you know, Steve played a leading role in establishing the sustainability program at Caltrans during the Brown administration. Speaking of new opportunities with the federal government, Caltrans' most recent SB1 efficiencies report, which you're going to hear about today, identifies several opportunities to make project delivery more efficient. The report specifically mentions the possibility of using CEQA in place of NEPA, and should that opportunity become a reality, we will see considerable benefits in terms of saving time and improving project delivery. In fact, just last month, US DOT published a final rule that proposes to eliminate duplication of environmental review. The new program still needs to be formally cleared by the new administration, but it could possibly allow Caltrans to use CEQA to meet its environmental review requirements under NEPA. And of course, using a single environmental document to review projects would be a huge time saver. A number of organizations, including Transportation California, California Association of Counties, and others, have urged the state to pursue the program. And so I've asked Director Omashakin to take a look at the new CEQA for NEPA reciprocity program, weigh the pros and cons, and recommend whether the state should apply for the program. So stay tuned, more to come on this. Finally, Madam Chair, since we last got together, the state saw a dramatic spike in new COVID cases as well as fatalities. And thankfully, some of these trends are now starting to decline. And just this week, the state took steps to end the regional stay-at-home orders, and that is based on upcoming projections for ICU capacity that will exceed the 15% minimum threshold and therefore support the lifting of restrictions. So that means all 58 counties now return to the color-coded tier-based system, and that allows certain activities and businesses to resume based on local case rates and test positivity. But I think it's also important to emphasize that most of the state is still in the purple category, which is the most restrictive tier. So our continued vigilance is absolutely necessary. We cannot let our guard down. And we at CalSTA and all of our departments continue to remain fully engaged with COVID-19 emergency response. Also, COVID vaccines have been administered over the past 7 weeks. In fact, 2.5 million doses have been given in that period of time. And just the other day, the governor announced that the state will adjust its vaccination strategy toward a more age-based priority system. And just to put it in context, it's important to note that individuals aged 65 and older have accounted for 75% of COVID deaths in the state. So the new strategy is designed to dramatically increase vaccination throughput. And that in turn will greatly expand access to emergency medical services for all Californians, because as we all know, medical services have been under great strain in recent weeks due to high caseloads. Also want to mention that CalSTA continues to lead a multi-agency task force on critical infrastructure and COVID-19 response. And as part of that effort, we've been meeting with stakeholders on a regular basis. In fact, just last week, a group of us, including Labor Secretary Julie Su, along with officials from CDPH, Cal OSHA, and GoBiz, met with Southern California port executives and labor leaders to go over high positivity test rates that have been reported at the ports of LA and Long Beach. We are looking closely at the situation, and we stand ready to intervene with local leadership to make sure that port operations are safe and that the supply chain is not disrupted. I also want to thank Director Omashakin and Caltrans staff for their willingness to support industry as well as state and local agencies responding to the pandemic. In just the past few days, Caltrans has been talking to oxygen supply companies about the possibility of issuing permits to oversized oxygen trucks to address an oxygen shortage impacting much of Southern California. And while we have not yet received any permit applications, I want to give a shout out to Caltrans for their willingness to think outside the box and come to the table with ideas to support the broader emergency response mission. And so with that, Madam Chair, that concludes my remarks. Thank you so much for the time, and I look forward to today's meeting.
Thank you so much, Secretary Kim. We have some commissioners that would like to comment. Let me start with Commissioner Inman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon. I guess it's afternoon. This has been a long day already. Secretary Kim, great to see you. In regard to the high COVID on the waterfront, anything you can do to help us down there? We have last week 45 vessels parked offshore, and so anchored offshore means no shore power and emissions for all of us. So not only do we have hiccups in the supply chain when we can't get the goods in, but I think that's a huge air quality issue. too. So anything we can do to help our waterfront keep moving would be greatly appreciated. And if any of us can help, let us know. So appreciate you leaning in for us.
Thanks, Commissioner Inman, for bringing that up. We've been in close contact with both the ports of LA, Long Beach, and other ports. We are very much aware of the scenario you just described, 40 some odd vessels out at sea, unable to berth. And so we are coordinating closely with both ports and want to help them address that and try to resolve it. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, Maersk told me that on average it's like 14 days their vessels are parked out there. So, I mean, that's, talk about, well, yeah, that's not good. So anything you can do, appreciate.
Are there other commissioners that had questions? I definitely have one. Secretary Kim, you had mentioned in a number of places when we've been on speaking engagements together about the change in rules federally about commercial activity along freeways. Can you talk about that and the vision about zero emission freight?
Yes, thanks, Chair Norton. Last year, when the House approved its transportation reauthorization bill called the Invest in America Act, we were able to get some language inserted into the bill that eliminated the long-standing federal prohibition on commercial activity at interstate rest areas. It's a long and sordid history. I won't get into it here, but the fact that the House passed that measure as part of the reauthorization bill was huge. And huge credit to Congresswoman Grace Napolitano for leading that effort. And now with the new session of Congress underway, the House will need to re-up that bill and hopefully with that same provision so that we can carry that forward and make it possible to expand and install EV charging stations along interstate rest areas. So that's a significant provision. And if we're going to increase adoption and acceptance of electric vehicles, we obviously have to dramatically expand the EV charging network. And that includes placing them at locations such as interstate rest areas. So that's a huge part of the strategy.
And would that also apply to hydrogen and hydrogen fueling areas?
Yes, all alternative fuel, which would be broadly defined as hydrogen and of course battery electric, and I'm sure I'm leaving something out, but generally all alternative fuel vehicles.
Thank you so much. Congratulations on getting that change.
Thank you.
Are there any other commissioners that would like to speak? Okay, if not, we have no public comment on this item. Thank you so much, Secretary Kim, and we look forward to your participation throughout this meeting.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. I want to call on Commissioner Alvarado because, like an idiot, in my commissioner report, I completely forgot about him. So mea culpa, and thank you very much, Commissioner Alvarado. The floor is yours.
No problem. I just wanted to say a quick thank you to all my fellow commissioners for the support of my election to vice chair. Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Commissioner Alvarado, how long have you been a CTC commissioner, and how many offices have you held while being on the CTC commission? Because you certainly have been a leader for many parts of what has been a very stellar career on the commission.
I've been around since 2004 and served both as vice chair and chair a couple of times. So this is quite an honor again. Thank you.
Thank you for your leadership. Commissioners, do you have any other comments you'd like to make in the commission report so that I don't blow it again? Okay. Well, seeing none, we will move to Caltrans Director Tokes Omashakin for his report. Thank you. Director Omashakin. Okay, if we don't hear from him in a little bit, we'll move to item 10, Vince Mamano for FHWA. Oh,
Yeah.
wonderful to see you, Director Omashakin. Thank you.
Thank you. I was trying to figure out how to get my camera on here and my mic. I've got them separated. Good afternoon, commissioners, CTC staff, members of the public and transportation partners. A very good afternoon. Thank you for allowing Caltrans to again share a little bit into some of the items that we were working on, how last year in particular went as I give this update report. Before I get into my remarks, I want to thank or congratulate rather again Vice Chair Alvarado for your reappointment as Vice Chair, and Chair Norton. Congratulations again to you in your reappointment. I also want to thank Assembly Member Frazier for his service while being the chair from the Assembly for several years. He was the first member of the legislature I met with when I got to California. He gave me a warm welcome in his office, and I want to thank him for his leadership on SB1 in particular, helping to get that landmark bill passed, and of course his very deep passion for safety that we both share. So thank you, Assemblymember Frazier, and also congratulations to Assemblymember Friedman and Senator Gonzalez, as well as they step into new leadership roles at the legislature. Congratulations, and look forward to working with the both of you. So as usual in my report, I like to start with a recognition of a staff member. If you could go to the next slide. Today I'm recognizing Mark Counts. Mark is a senior transportation surveyor, and he's again being recognized here as an exceptional employee to the department. A little bit about Mark. Again, he's the chief of the Office of Surveying Systems. He is one of those people that he takes a lot of passion in building relationships. He's into kindness and inclusivity within the department. He's really gifted at bringing people together. And you can tell by the way he's smiling in this particular graphic. He's very process improvement driven. He's into innovation. He has a tireless enthusiasm for surveying work, and he champions it, the craft of surveying at every single turn that he can. Mark is a strong proponent of when you teach, you learn. That outlook. When you teach, you learn. He's a big proponent of it. He's pursuing a master's degree in geodesy at Ohio State University while he's working. He loves reaching out to young people in their pursuit of career excellence and career success as well. And not only is he going to school, he's also doing some technical mentoring within the department and across the state. He's a mentor with other CAD users in districts across Caltrans, and he's a program facilitator and instructor at Santiago Canyon College. And he works on developing relationships with students to deliver land survey content and culture. Not only is he doing that, but recently he published in a magazine called Excite Magazine, a worldwide publication for geospatial professionals, where he was selected in their 40 under 40 profiles. And he also published in that same magazine an article called The 3 E's: Educate, Equip, and Empower of Apprentices. So Mark's a busy guy. I just want to thank him for the work that he's doing, not only within Caltrans, but how he's been reaching out to people who are coming up in the industry to get them to understand the importance of surveying, and as he's doing that work with the next generation. So Mark Counts, kudos to you. Thanks for everything that you do in the transportation community, and in particular for Caltrans. Thanks, Mark. Next slide. So a few personnel updates from key roles within the department that you should know if you're not aware of this. We have recently appointed James Anderson as the chief of the headquarters division of finance and programming. Many of you got a chance to know Bruce over many years. James Anderson is replacing Bruce in this important role, but James has over 28 years of transportation management and engineering experience. He served in various leadership roles throughout headquarters and District 3 and District 4. He has obtained comprehensive knowledge on project development, programming, and project management. And I look forward to his leadership in taking the financial programming and all the programming that we do at Caltrans to the next level within the department. Next slide. And many of you may know Ray Hopkins as well already. He's now the Division Chief of Construction at Caltrans. Ray joined Caltrans in 1998, started his career as a design engineer in Fresno before he moved into construction. He recently served as the Deputy Division Chief of Construction, so he was the #2 guy in construction for a short period. In addition to his Caltrans construction experience, Ray brings extensive leadership and management experience gained over 28 years facilitating and overseeing engineering projects across the globe. I also recently learned that Ray, he told me in a meeting recently that he's a major in the Army. I want to thank Ray for his service. I told him I'm going to stop calling him Ray. He's Major Hopkins from now on. So when you see him, call him Major Hopkins instead. So again, congratulations to both of them as they will be leading a significant part of Caltrans's project delivery work moving forward. Next slide. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about 2020. Director Weiss and Secretary Kim and Vice Chair Norton, I think you touched on this a little bit already, but you know, by far, this is probably the most challenging year of our lifetime. It was the most. Through it all, we saw everything from political unrest to inequity and justice challenges. We saw the impacts of climate change, fires. The list just kept going on, and it got bookended, unfortunately, in this year as well, this January, by the unrest that we saw, in Washington, as the Capitol was stormed and attacked. So it's just been a roller coaster ride for the last 10 or 11 months for us. But what I'm really happy to say, and I'm fortunate to say, is that we as a transportation community, all of us, like Chair Norton mentioned earlier, all of us have really been able to weather the storm a little bit. You know, there's a famous philosopher, he's not really a philosopher, but I like to jokingly say he is, named Iron Mike, who said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And look, we all plan to have a great year in 2020, but we got punched in the face. We got punched in the gut. It was a really, really tough year. But we were resilient, and our team, all of us, the transportation community, we were able to stand tall, and we got a lot done. So just a quick reflection on 2020, and then I'll close out on a few other highlights. Next slide. First of all, the COVID relief. Because of COVID, we now have we have some dollars coming to the state. I think there will be some highlights on this later on in the meeting. But overall, the transportation industry received roughly $45 billion in COVID relief from the federal government. I think Administrator Mamano may talk about that a little bit later. I'm not sure what's in his remarks. But particularly, Federal Highways got $10 billion for transportation. And out of that $10 billion, almost 10% of it, or $912 million, is coming to California in COVID relief funding, 912. There's going to be a 60-40 split. We've agreed with the administration and CTC leadership that there will be a 60-40 split on that COVID relief between Caltrans and the local government community. So we look forward to those funds being dispersed and being spent on the relief on the shortfalls that we've seen in transportation project funding across the state of California. Next slide. So thinking back through 2020 again, safety was our top priority that we focused on. A few key things to remember about what we accomplished in 2020. Number one, we hired a chief safety officer in 2020, Rachel Carpenter. I'm sure you've had a chance to have some discussions with her. We created a safety division, and we established a safety action plan that we now have a commitment to. And that safety action plan has 4 pillars of safety. Number one, we're going to double down on what works, accelerate advanced technology, lead a safety culture, and integrate equity. Those are the 4 pillars of safety. We're funding new safety. We're looking into funding new safety strategies to implement proactive countermeasures. We finalized a strategic highway safety plan. We implemented the deliveries that were required in the HSIP, the Highway Safety Improvement Program. Through engineering, we're supporting ongoing safety-related project delivery, and we're also engaging in a new process to work with local agencies for the 2021 California Safety Performance Targets. So again, safety is on the forefront of everything that we were able to get done in 2020. Next slide. Very quickly, before I close on safety, I wanted to mention the fact that we're going to be talking more and more about a systems approach to addressing safety, a safe systems approach rather. In Europe, in the EU, here's something that I'm hoping all of us see and pay attention to, that that the EU was able to get done over the recent years as it relates to safety. You can see very quickly from this graphic, in the early 2000s, the fatality numbers in the EU were over 50,000. Over 50,000 people were getting killed on the transportation system in Europe. And I like to make this comparison to the UK, to England, and in EU often, because they are sometimes more advanced on these issues. But as you can see over the years, what's happened to the system in the EU, as late as 2018, that number was down to 25,000, so cutting half. The most recent numbers that I've seen in 2019, the number was actually right at 23,000 fatalities in the entire European Union, in the entire place. So when people say when we talk about a vision zero and having a 30-year outlook, that we want to drive down fatality numbers for our most vulnerable users and the automobile users of our system, saying that we want to get there, I believe we can get there. We can get there. The example is right here in front of us, and what they did was, again, use a safe systems approach to drive down the numbers you see all the way down to less than 50% of what it was in the early 2000s. So we can get there. Next slide. Climate resilience, very quickly. We updated the department's sea level rise guidance. It's underway, rather. We developed a draft outline for online climate change training for CEQA review and analysis of the district for district environmental staff. We completed interim guidance on determining CEQA significance for greenhouse gas emissions for projects on the state highway system. We're also greening our fleet to bring on more zero emissions fleets and developing guidance to advance ZEV charging throughout our facilities. We're updating our ZEV action plan to align our efforts with the administration's recent executive orders and the governor's ZEV strategy. We're also committed to working with partners to implement SB 743 to rethink how we build projects so Californians can absolutely drive less. We have our district adaptation plans that fit into the vulnerability assessments. We've completed 9 of 12 districts. The last 3 were completed will be completed at the end of February in 2021. So we're almost done with all the vulnerability assessment reports. And of course, everyone is familiar with the ongoing work related to active transportation, the active transportation plans and projects that we're doing. Next slide. As far as equity goes, I'm sure you recall that we, not only you as the CTC were very instrumental in leadership on equity issues throughout 2020. Thank you for the work that you did. We were making our efforts as well on equity. One of the things that we did within the department was we held conversations about equity that were internally focused that will be released to the public as well soon. We brought on people like Tamika Butler, former commissioner, to engage us in issues on equity. And in December, we released our equity statement that received a pretty warm welcome from our staff internally and externally. What we want to do is live an equity statement, not just have a statement and talk about it, but actually live it. That statement acknowledges disparities in benefits and the burdens of our transportation system from the past, and decisions by Caltrans and transportation agencies and partners. It highlights 4 Ps that we will be using to guide our work on equity moving forward: people, programs and projects, partnerships, and the planet. We created a new office in Caltrans called CORE that will support and guide Caltrans through centering the 4 Ps throughout our work and updating our race and equity action plan. So that's very quickly some of the things that are happening on equity. Next slide. Maintenance activities. This is again a big part of what our responsibility is and what people see from Caltrans first when they're on our system. The impacts of COVID, the wildfires really challenged our maintenance teams throughout this year. But nevertheless, we persevered. More than 1,300 miles of various pavement strategies were completed. We inspected 13,000 bridges, both state and locally owned bridges. And we completed 29 projects containing 309 bridges at a value of $60 million or more, using both state funds, state highway account funds, and SB1 funds. Performed 33,000 culvert inspections. 149 culverts were improved. And 142 miles of guardrails, 38 miles of safety barriers were repaired, and also 21,000 repairs to a traffic management system. Caltrans spent more than $207 million on emergency contracts to recover from the 2020 statewide wildfires. So a lot of work happened throughout 2020, despite all those challenges on the maintenance front for Caltrans. Next slide. Litter cleanup, which is very much connected to the maintenance work. Again, this is one of the biggest challenges that we face at Caltrans, is addressing litter-related issues. We spent in 2019, we spent more than $100 million addressing litter. But again, this is a focus for us. I get frequent emails and frequent phone calls from people across the state saying, what is Caltrans doing about all the litter? Why can't all the litter be cleaned more quickly? But again, the pandemic has hampered our ability to be able to do as much as we want to do, because we can't gather crews like we have in the past. But this is nevertheless a focus for us. We're going to continue to try to be innovative in our approaches to addressing litter issues across the state. Next slide. Project delivery, very quickly. Just you can look at these graphics and you will see how much we were still able to get done. The projects that were ready to construct in 2019, there were 261. In 2020, there were 267. The amount that we were able to complete, you can see we were able to do almost the exact same number we did in 2019. We were able to do that in 2020 again, despite all the challenges. And when you look at the value of those projects in 2019, the value of those projects was a little over $3 billion. In 2020, it was $3.5 billion. And again, you can see very closely that we almost delivered the exact same amount of projects in 2020 that we did in 2019, despite all those challenges. Next slide. Again, here's where those projects that we delivered in 2020, most of them were safety or other shop-related projects, but you can see bridges, pavement, culvert, TMS projects. Next slide. And here's, again, sort of the difference between 2019 and 2020. On safety projects, we had more. And on bridges, we had more projects. And in total, again, you can see the number of projects, 267 in 2020 versus 261 in 2019. Next slide. And I'll close with these, just these couple more slides. Our 5 priorities will remain a focus for us: safety, modality, innovation, efficiencies, and partnerships or stakeholder engagement. Those were the things we focused on throughout 2020. That will remain the same moving forward in 2021. Next slide. And finally, we today wrote out to our staff the strategic plan that we will be using moving forward that really sort of embraced those 5 priorities. You'll be hearing more about the strategic plan in the coming months and how the strategic plan will guide our work, but it's really exciting, I can tell you. Equity, climate action are key elements that are new to this strategic plan that were not in the prior strategic plan. And I think it will really sort of reshape how we do our work moving forward as we embrace an outlook that is very much focused on people, not just the infrastructure that we're responsible for delivering. So Donna Berry and Mike Johnson will be providing an update on some other key transportation projects that I think Secretary Kim mentioned early on. So look forward to the presentations that they will be providing later. So I know that was a lot, but I would love to take any questions, Chair Norton, if there are any questions for me whatsoever. Again, thank you for allowing Caltrans an opportunity to provide an update.
Thank you so much, Director Omershakin. And we do have some questions for you. We have Commissioners Kehoe and Commissioner Liu that want to ask some questions of you.
Sure thing.
Director Omershakin, hi, Chris Kehoe here. Thanks for your response earlier this week to my email. And I just would like to hear a little bit more today or at another time about Caltrans' response to litter along the freeways especially. I brought this to your attention because I received an email from Mayor Catherine Blakespear, who's the Sandag chair this year, and she's also heading up their subcommittee on litter abatement. And as you say, it's a chronic issue and you hear about it a lot. I realize we're putting things on your plate every day. We heard hours of testimony this morning about everything your staff's doing on homelessness, litter abatement, railroad right-of-ways, et cetera. But it continues to need focused attention. So tell us what you're doing. That's my first and main question. And then I'd like to ask if District 11 is aware of this also. If Caltrans and Sandag can get together for a briefing to Caltrans District 11 can get together with Sandag for a briefing to this subcommittee so those local members know what's going on.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Kehoe. We will follow through on that request to organize a meeting or discussion, particularly on this issue. To answer your question, look, this is in addition to all the issues that we're faced with, that we're challenged with. This is one of the ones that is not easy to tackle. Just like you did, I've received in the last 2 or 3 weeks countless emails from citizens and elected officials saying, what's going on with litter? Like, what's up with this? Why can't we do a better job of keeping our highway system cleaner? And not only is it an aesthetics issue or an environmental issue, it's a safety issue as well. because it can become a safety hazard. And I want you to know that we're committed to trying to figure out how to get better at this. But let me raise just three things very quickly that we're doing, sort of our framework to address this issue. Number one, trash pickup, trash collection. We spent, again, over $100 million. We don't know the numbers for 2020 yet, but in 2019, we spent over $100 million on picking up litter. That's money that could go to repairing the highway system, the transportation system that we're using to pick up trash. In your district area alone, Commissioner Kehoe, the number was $12.6 million that we spent on trash and litter pickup just in 11. So this is an issue that it's being no doubt compounded by the pandemic. But we don't want to make excuses. Like I don't want to sit here and just keep saying, yeah, we're spending money. But this framework that I'm describing, number one, picking up trash collecting, and doing it in a partnership, with the volunteers, with the sheriff's offices and other agencies is going to be key. A lot of that work is shut down now because of the pandemic. So, for example, in your district, we work with the sheriff's offices and local entities to partner on this. We can't do that work at the moment. To pull people in vans to go do this work, that work can happen. But number one is trash collection and pickup. Number two is accountability and education. Education and accountability. We have to do a better job, we Caltrans and all of us, of educating the public about what's happening, and holding people accountable to the decisions they're making. Because all this trash is not just people driving or people who are living on the side of our roadways, or it's not just that. I mean, even though that's a big part of the problem, there are people who are literally driving and tossing out trash. We've got people picking up trash literally on the side of the road, and they're getting hit with trash as they're picking up trash. That's pretty embarrassing. But if we take pride in this state and pride in this transportation system that we're responsible for, people need to understand that the impact of what they're doing, the impact of the litter. And so we need to have a better campaign. I don't think our campaign is good enough. So I want you to hold us accountable to that. We need to have a better campaign, better education, and hold the public accountable for maintaining this great state, the public spaces of this great state. And finally, enforcement of litter and anti-litter and illegal dumping. The enforcement component is key. Like, people actually need to be penalized for doing this. I know it's harsh to say in a climate like this that we're in, where so many people are economically challenged, especially, but we need to be held accountable. We can't just continue to dump in places that we wish. Apologies, it's the governor's office. But that has to be. We have to use that framework. We have to use that system to get this the cleanups that we need to get done across the state. So, Commissioner Kehoe, in a more appropriate setting, I think I'll be glad in our team to do a better job of explaining this, and maybe you and members of the legislature and the commission can really help us with our efforts and our plan to address this issue.
Thanks, Totes. As usual, you've got a lot of good information for us. I'll follow up with the local end and see how they want to proceed, and I know we can count on your people to be there. And yes. I agree with everything you said.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Director Omershakin, we have a question from Commissioner Liu as well.
Yeah, I'm so tempted to continue on this subject. I mean, I can remember that Lady Bird Johnson had a way of dealing with this, and I also think of spending $100 million on just picking up litter is just, I mean, it's absolutely horrendous. And, you know, I've done some work in the field of Superfund where people are joint and severally liable if they add to the problem. So, you know, the next guy who throws a bag of trash out the window, maybe he gets to pay the $100 million. we should think about some legislative changes that would make that happen. But I did hear you say in that onslaught of information that you provided us, Director, was that you're cleaning up your fleets. I'm very happy to hear that, and I'd love to learn more about it. Because in all honesty, I lost a little bit of sleep over the holidays, waking up thinking about, wow, I should be really asking about the status of the fleets, not only of Caltrans, but the contractors. And it's not only the on-road stuff, but the construction equipment, it lasts forever. It can be really dirty. It can really add to the problem of air pollution and local air toxics and climate change and all of those things. So if you could figure out a way perhaps to update us on your efforts to clean up your fleets, and then the question of whether or not what we can do and working with you to make sure that your contractors are using the cleanest available vehicles and off-road technologies. And because some of your contractors are so big, if you get them to clean up their fleets, it's going to help with every contract they get. I'd love to hear about that. So thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. We will set something up on that either in this setting at the commission or a separate meeting if you prefer that. But as you know, we probably have the largest fleet in the state because of the work that we do. Everything from light duty cars to the heaviest of equipment that you can imagine. And we're trying our best to turn it over to be more ZEV. Everything from electric to hydrogen fuel, whatever it takes to not be consuming more fuel, we're trying. So we'll be glad to set something up. We have a backlog, I will say, on turning over that fleet. A lot of our vehicles are dated and need to be off the road and off the system. But as we're gradually getting to that backlog, we're making sure it's ZEV, they're ZEV vehicles. So we'll provide that update.
I know a lot of people in the field of manufacturing, zero, near zero emission technologies that would love to help you out.
Okay.
Are there any other commissioners that had questions or input? I'd like to, before we end, we've got Assemblywoman Friedman, who's going to come at 2:30, and she may have some comments for you, Director Omashakin. So if you can stick around, that would be great. I do want to commend you, and that is the staff that you had present today at our workshop, namely Lindsay Hart and Rachel Carpenter. Both their lived experience and the way they came at these two very important issues were extraordinary. And I know that comes from your leadership as well. And we know we're going to have some conversation about the homeless issue and an item 57 tomorrow. But I was very impressed to hear how they were coming at these issues and the kind of work that you're doing. This is a new Caltrans for many of us, and we're really proud to see it.
Thank you, Chair Norton. I'm very thankful to both ladies for their leadership on those issues. They are the subject matter experts and leaders for us, and they have a history and a connection with the issue, as you could tell. And we've got a lot of work to do, but I think we've got the right people leading the way on it. So thank you, Chair Norton.
We did have some public testimony about concerns about access to homeless sites on Caltrans property, so that were not related to the 710 North. So we're going to be following up with you and some city council staff in Los Angeles on that issue.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. Well, with that, thank you very much. I see we have no public comment on your report, and so we will move to Vince Mamano from FHWA. Great to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Congratulations to both you and Vice Chair Alvarado.
Thank you.
And I tell you, just the discussion you all were having this morning and your comments about the employees from Caltrans, I think, are a good example of what I seem to see is just compassion. They're real life people. You've got a lot of in the Caltrans leadership, and it's not just Caltrans, it's the department, it's the transportation community in California. Tokes had that list of all the success they've had in 2020 and all the work they did in 2020, and it's an example of the locals did similar acceleration of projects and were able to deliver projects, and it's just the talent, the the drive, the commitment with the transportation professionals in California is exceptional. I don't know that every other state can say that they've delivered like California delivered. And you mentioned just this morning's conversation, just the compassion and the real people that are dealing with this at Caltrans and at the local agencies. They're real live people that are dealing with it, that actually really care about the issues they're dealing with. So I just want to applaud everybody in those areas. I think it's fun to work in a circle like this because of people like that. Thanks to David, Kim, and Tokes for covering my presentation. So it should be nice and quick. Want to cover, Secretary Buttigieg. We talked about them. Undersecretary Polly Trottenberg. I think that's so. We refer to Secretary as S1 and S2 is Polly Trottenberg. She was in the previous Obama administration in the Secretary's office, so we're very familiar with her. I want to go down a couple of the appointments that have been made in the different modal administrations. There's Amit Bose, is the Deputy Administrator for the Federal Rail Administration. You've already mentioned Stephen Cliff is the Deputy Administrator for the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. I don't think a lot of people realize the work that Stephen did to help us work through the SAFE rule and try and help us to continue to keep transportation projects going during the implementation of the SAFE rule. So Stephen was a big help in that last year. And then we have Nuria Fernandez for the Federal Transit Administration, Deputy Administrator. I think it's Meera Joshi, Deputy Administrator for Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Lucinda Leslie, Deputy Administrator for Maritime Administration. Bradley Mims for Federal Aviation Administration. And for the Federal Highway Administration, it's Stephanie Pollock. And I know Stephanie Pollock was in Massachusetts, so she was CEO of Massachusetts Department of Transportation prior to. So all these are deputy administrator positions. In federal government, the administrator positions have to get confirmed. So these are all coming in as deputy administrator, and we'll see where the administration goes with what they do, whether they move them up or they add different people as administrator. I don't know how that's going to work. I've seen it happen in all different types of directions. But I wanted to hit on a couple things. I think I may have hit this last time, but I just want to restate because all of these priorities have been covered here in the conversation just in the first hour and a half of this meeting. The new administration, the president's priority, the number one priority is COVID. Number two priority is economic recovery. Number three priority is racial equity. And the number four is climate change. And you've hit all four of those already in the hour and a half we've been talking. So I'm looking forward to a lot of partnership in those areas, a lot of innovation in those areas, and I think California will have a lot to offer in those innovations. A couple things that have already been mentioned a little bit. I'll get a little bit more detail on them. We had a Consolidated Appropriations Act, so that was our regular appropriations. We talked about the authorizing legislation, the FAST Act. That was extended all the way to the end of September of this year. So that's a good thing, except it was at 2020 levels, which isn't so great. But we had our 2021 obligation limitation. That's our formula, about $3.5 billion. That's our regular formula money. Just one piece of that I want to mention is that did continue the repurposing of earmarks. So those have been brought out in the Appropriations Acts, not the Authorizing Act. So FAST Act doesn't say that, but Appropriations Acts do or have said that. So we're going to be continuing the repurposing earmarks under the same definition that we did it in the 2020 appropriation. So it's going to be similar as it was last year. There was an additional highway infrastructure program funds allocated. California got about 83 million of that, 59 million for activities eligible under the STBG program, and 24 million for a bridge replacement, and that's consistent with 2020, or actually it's consistent with the last 3 years. And then finally, we talked a little bit about the COVID response and relief supplemental appropriations. California got 912 million of that. There was $729 million is allocated for any area and $183 million for urbanized areas greater than 200,000. Those funds are general funds, so those funds are 100% federal share and don't affect our obligation limitation. So it doesn't go against that 3.5 billion that we had earlier, that we were talking about earlier under our limitation. So that's additional money. The funds are going to need to be obligated by September 30th of 2024. And our headquarters is in the process of putting together some question and answers on that, because there's been some questions. Where can we put that? How does it get broken down? But generally, it is STBG, used to be the STP program, STBG related type funding. Many of you may remember back in 2009 when we had the Recovery Act came out, there's very similar where it was STP type funding, and this is STBG program funding. So I understand from Tokes' discussion that there's been decision on how that's going to be allocated here in California. Those are state decisions, not federal decisions. And then lastly, there's you may have seen the INFRA program, the BUILD program. There was a release in January. The department pulled that release back for the notice of funding opportunity to address the new administration's priorities. So hopefully we'll be seeing that in the next month or so for those new programs. And finally, lastly, David mentioned I think I said this last time, David mentioned the talk about the potential privatizing of rest areas, putting charging stations in rest areas and things like that. That's all in potential legislation. It's not real right now. So we can't go out and do that yet. We can only do that when we get a legislation that approves that, because at this moment, that's not legal. We're actually trying to find different ways to do some experimental programs and things like that to try and just see if there's anything we can do to help facilitate that. But it'll remain to be seen what's in the next legislation. And I know this current administration has been talking about future corona or COVID relief coming with a lot of discussion about infrastructure. So again, there's been a lot of discussion about future legislation on relief, and until we see it signed by the president, it's all talk about future legislation that can be done. So,
Yeah.
And I think that is all I have.
Well, thank
No
you.
comments?
We have a couple comments. I had a couple questions. There's no public comment, but I had a question for you because there have been some articles saying that the Biden administration is not looking to do a cost of living increase for the gas tax. And so the question about how the Highway Trust Fund is going to keep getting replenished continues to come up. I just wanted to know if you had any information on that, or what the vision is for the
Right,
Highway Trust Fund and the gas tax.
So that the entire Highway Trust Fund, where the direction that goes, that comes from Congress. So Congress is going to come up, in the last, in the FAST Act, we had opportunities for experiments, when California has gotten some experimenting in road user charge, that type of a thing. I know the Western Road User Charge Group had gotten some funding for that also. So there's continued interest that I've seen in the current legislation that wants to research it, wants to find different ways, and if there's anything else that's out there they're looking to try and see. But it'll take Congress to make a call on whether a gas tax comes up or how that would work, or if there was going to be a road charge. So there's been a lot of discussion around that, but that's a congressional decision, not a career decision.
Well, thank you very much. I don't see any other comments from other commissioners other than Commissioner Joe Liu.
Yes, hi, Vince. Just between you and me, we hear that this infrastructure bill will be happening sometime, perhaps sometime soon. And
hey, there's other people listening. There's other people listening.
we know that we as California are your favorite. And we would sure love to hear whatever recommendations you have to make sure that whatever infrastructure funding gets to us, that it meets our needs and our priorities and allows for the flexibility that we need. and recommendations you have to make sure that we get, our fair share or perhaps a bit more. But, we assume you're looking out for us, but if I'd love to hear whatever advice you could offer.
So as much influence as I have over that whole decision on how much California gets, I like to think I'm very influential in the whole entire scheme of things, but I'm not sure if you're seeing the same number of hair on my head as the amount of influence I have in that area. But no, I think what you'll see, one of the things that you see in California is things like the readiness for August redistribution. So we got a record number of dollars in August redistribution, but because California is ready for dollars to be spent, and we can spend them now. There's been identification of needs everywhere, and I would imagine that in the next, be ready for someone to say, hey, what are your needs? And I know California can say that right now. Those are the types of things that are questions that get asked during this time. A good assessment of your infrastructure. I know Caltrans has really just put a great deal of focus on structures, say, for instance, the bridges and tunnels in California. They've really done an outstanding job. The rest of the country is looking at California on how they're looking at tunnel inspections and tunnel critical findings and bridge inspections and their load rating program and things like that to show, or an asset management program to show, how are you ready? How can you identify what your needs are right now so that if someone's doing a math equation later to say, what are the needs in this country, California can add their piece of the math equation immediately. And I think that's happened in the past, and I think that's something that you're ready to do this moment.
We have an item today that says that we have $116 billion of need for the next 10 years and $40 billion of revenue. So we're ready.
Right. Right. So I think that's something that you've seen, and we've seen that in the past too. In California, in the past has typically gotten, like Toke said, about 10% of the Highway Trust Fund, all the apportionment, about, give or take. Like I said, I think the readiness that California provides, and the information that you can provide and have provided is critical at this time, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I think we have not received any other questions to speak, but I wanted to just say thank you so much. We're going to be calling upon you a lot, and we thank you for being a great liaison for the commission to the federal government. Much appreciated.
And I have to say, I really appreciate the partnerships that we have. I know that during this pandemic, it's been really challenging. You just haven't been able to get to see people, but I think that those partnerships that were created and have been created over the years has allowed California to be so successful during this time when we can't stand next to each other. So I value those partnerships, and again, congratulations on all the success that everybody on this call has had in delivering projects. So have a great year.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to it. Okay, our next item is the regional agencies moderator, Yvonne Garcia.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
We sure can.
All right. Again, my name is Yvonne Garcia with the Butte County Association of Governments. First, congratulations, Madam Chair and Vice Chair Alvarado. And congratulations to James Anderson and the others identified by Director Omashakin. We look forward to working with you. At yesterday's statewide RTPA meeting, we were informed from the California Transit Association that they were re-examining their approach for Transportation Development Act reform, things they were working on last year. Given this last full year of COVID, the short-term recommendation is to support a continued relief provision by waiving financial penalties to transit operators not meeting fare box recovery requirements. So just an extension of that. Secretary Kim, if you're listening, thank you. Big thanks to Darwin Masavi from CalSTA for presenting yesterday to the RTPA group. Very much appreciated. The regions look forward to a scheduled February 16th workshop on the CAPTI and continued dialogue with that. Regarding the allocation capacity, regions are concerned that there may not be sufficient capacity to allocate current year STIP programming. The regions look forward to working with the Commission and Caltrans for possible solutions. Currently, we are polling regions to identify projects that would be coming in for a time extension that would free up capacity for this fiscal year. So we'll get that information shortly to Ms. Favila of your staff. There is significant interest in the COVID relief bill and how funds would be distributed. We recognize that as you heard from Vince, 183 million of the 912 million is to be sub-allocated to urbanized regions over 200,000 in population. The regions look forward to receiving upcoming guidance and direction from FHWA. We understand some discussions are occurring between CalSTA, Caltrans, and CTC staff regarding these funds. Yesterday, both STIP and STBG were discussed. From a regional perspective, there's a lot of interest in using the STBG formula. Once additional guidance is made available from FHWA, the regions would like to request a workshop to fully engage in those conversations. A big thank you to local assistants for your comprehensive update on the various subjects presented yesterday. What stood out was the need to provide the time necessary to allow for adequate dialogue with Caltrans and the regional agencies responsible for project delivery. Big thanks to Dee Lamb from Local Assistance for responding so quickly. In the works, Madam Chair, is we're working on a local assistance training day of some sort to provide the necessary time. Of particular interest, Caltrans development of a reporting and monitoring tool to access state and federal data to help manage projects. We also look forward to additional discussions with Caltrans on obligation authority to make sure no funds are lost to the state and to ensure California continues to capitalize on August redistribution. The Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan draft is scheduled for this summer of 2021. Regions look forward on receiving an early draft for review. And lastly, we were presented with a summary of the HEP Cycle 5 and appreciate the early release of staff's recommendations that may come out around February 8th. With 2.4 billion in ATP application requests, 2.4 billion, and approximately 450 million in programming revenues, the program needs additional revenue sources. One suggested funding source that keeps coming up was the eligibility and use of cap and trade funds. ATP projects address safety, air quality, public health, and like I tell my kids, miles of smiles. As a cycling advocate, any and all funds are welcome. Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, are there any questions or comments you'd like to make? And I see that there are no public comments, so thank you very much. And we'll move on to item 11. And item 12, and that's the Rural Counties Task Force Chair, Woodrow Deloria.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Great. Well, congratulations on your re-elections, Chair Norton and Vice Chair Alvarado. This is Woodrow Deloria, Chair of the Rural Counties Task Force and the Executive Director of the El Dorado County Transportation Commission. Forgive me for declining to use my camera, but as is the case with many of my rural colleagues, I have very limited bandwidth today up in the foothills, so bear with me. On behalf of the Rural Counties Task Force, I'd like to congratulate Teresa Favila and Matthew Yazcott on their recent promotions. Our CTF members have worked with both of them extensively and look forward to their continued support in their new roles with the Commission. The RCTF held their first meeting of the new year on January 15th, and we received a comprehensive update from your staff, including an update on the federal COVID relief from Paul Golazewski, and are looking forward to working with CTC staff and FHWA to ensure rural California also receives much needed crisis relief funding through any means possible. As always, Lori Waters showed her partnership and awareness of the active transportation needs of the 26 rural counties and gave us an update on the current active transportation plan program. And while we understand the program is terribly overly subscribed and underfunded, we hope that as new funding is identified, rural active transportation will continue to be given the focus and consideration it so greatly deserves. We also received updates on and discussed the local partnership program, the Solutions for Congested Corridors program, and the Trade Corridor Enhancement program, as well as the local streets and roads. Thanks to all of the staff who provided these updates and continue to provide great partnership and coordination with all of our Rural Counties Task Force members. The Rural Counties Task Force also received an update on the Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan, or ITSP, from Francis D. Sanchez of Caltrans, and will continue to coordinate on this effort as many of the rural state routes are really fundamental to the interregional travel throughout California. And finally, with the recent snowfall, many of our mountain regions are again experiencing an increase in tourism and recreation visitation by many of our urban and suburban neighbors who are enjoying the outdoors and open space opportunities during this ongoing pandemic. And as we did during our warm weather months, our local economies welcome the influx of these visitors. However, our rural communities and the rural transportation infrastructure therein have been more impacted over these past 11 months due to this increase in traffic over this recent period, likely due almost entirely to the pandemic and the changing travel behaviors and increase in interregional tourism and recreation travel. And I think I speak for all RCTF members in stating that I am filled with hope hearing Chair Norton's vision for infrastructure investment in 2020 and Secretary Kim's vision for a generational opportunity to work with the Biden administration on transformational investments across the entire transportation system of California. As we transition out of this pandemic with a renewed focus on prosperity and quality of life, rural Californians will be looking to the Commission, to Caltrans, and the many local and regional agencies, as well as our urban neighbors, to help plan for and invest in rural transportation infrastructure to both mitigate for the recent impacts and plan for the growing demands on our rural, state, and local transportation systems. Investments in rural transportation not only benefit rural communities, but the millions of Californians who rely on these rural interregional transportation facilities to access open space, active and outdoor recreation, and the natural environs our rural counties offer. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge the retirement of 2 leaders in rural transportation. Dan Landon has retired as the Executive Director from the Nevada County Transportation Commission after more than 30 years as a transportation planning practitioner. And Marcella May has also retired as the Executive Director from the Humboldt County Association of Governments. Both Dan and Marcella have been fervent advocates for rural California over the course of their careers, and they'll be dearly missed, but we wish them all the best on the next chapter of their lives. And that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, have any questions, comments? I see that there's no public comment. I want to thank you for the participation in our Equity Advisory Committee that we have rural representation, because we do recognize the importance of one size does not fit all transportation system. So thank you very much for continuing to present the unique needs in transportation from rural communities.
Thank you. We're honored to have a seat at the table.
Wonderful. Thanks again. With that, we're going to move to item 13, Self-Help Counties Coalition Executive Director Keith Dunn.
Thank you, Chair Norton. I'd like to first congratulate you and Vice Chair Alvarado on your reappointments to represent the board. We look forward to continuing to work with you. I'd also like to congratulate Senator Gonzalez and my good friend, Assemblywoman Laura Friedman. We're anxious to begin working with them in a more formal manner as their roles with the CTC and chairs of the committees. So we're looking forward to that a great deal. I will stipulate all previous comments with regards to briefings and agree with my previous presenter's words on that. I'm going to highlight a couple comments that I think were a theme that I think are critically important to our continued success, and that is the theme of partnerships and flexibility. I think every speaker previously, including those on the commission, talked about partnerships and flexibility as we look to build out of this pandemic situation. We're going to need to continue to focus on our partnerships and flexibility. Some of that comes, as mentioned before, in looking at the $900 million and making sure that that is used efficiently and effectively, looking at distributing that to the regions so they can get out and start building out of this pandemic, providing jobs and infrastructure that we've all critically been anxious to return to building. We are going to have an interesting year again in the legislature, as been mentioned before, working virtually. The Self-Help Counties Coalition will be looking to extend the a cap on the ICRP, which encourages a partnership with the department by limiting the costs that other government agencies are required to pay for overhead when doing business with Caltrans. So that's an effort that we worked in partnership with the former administration on. We look forward to extending that and building off of that partnership with the department. and also looking at exploring new opportunities to extend existing design build authority, as well as trying to streamline project delivery in any way possible to save resources so that we can do the most with that limited amount of funding that we have here locally at the state and federally. So with that, I will end my comments and just say that we're looking forward to a productive year in 2021, where we're going to continue to build on our partnership and enhance our flexibility so that we can all work together to keep our promises, not only to the voters of the self-help counties, but also to every resident in our state that relies on our system. With that, I just say thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I know we have some questions for you a bit about, no public comments, but questions about the sales tax impacts that self-help counties have been experiencing, and whether you've been able to make that up in freight and other ways, so that we're not seeing the same kind of tough impacts that 2008's recession had on sales tax receipts and therefore transportation funding.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we haven't had a formal collection of that data for a few months at least now, but I can speak anecdotally to that a little bit. There was an initial dip when the pandemic first came in, and then surprisingly for some counties, and not all, we saw a curve back up, and we think a lot of this had to do with online sales, specifically as a result of legislation that worked to address the South Dakota versus Wayfair decision that the Supreme Court heard. So I think that California's leadership, Assemblywoman Burke and Senator McGuire, who spearheaded that effort in conjunction with self-help and some other transportation interests, really went a long way. And who would have known that, a short time after that bill passed, it would be such a critical component to funding. So I think there's been an upward trend that we wouldn't have normally expected as a result of that legislation. And then we did see some, fluctuations. We're going to be polling our membership again here in the next couple of weeks to see if we can get a better overall view of 2021. Obviously, revenues were down. I think that depending, some counties that had either high car dealership or tourism impacts had longer lasting dips than some others. But we will get that information put together. We were on a panel with the CTC the last time we presented it, so we'll get it to Executive Director Weiss and look forward to speaking to the commission more in depth about that at your convenience.
Thank you. We'd be very interested in that data. Thank you so much for compiling it for us. With that, other commissioners who wish to speak? Hearing none, I appreciate your time, and we will move on to item 14. Jose Osguera and Kyle Gradinger on the California Integrated Travel Project update.
Sure. Good afternoon and congratulations, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners, and Transportation partners and members of the public. Item 14 is an information item. I would like to welcome Kyle Gradinger, Caltrans Division Chief for Rail and Mass Transportation, and Gillian Gillette, Caltrans Program Manager. They will provide an update on the California Integrated Travel Project. The project will facilitate the use of public transportation by offering a seamless trip planning and payment process across multiple modes of transportation. First, we'll hear from Kyle. Kyle, welcome.
Thank you, Jose. Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Congratulations, and fellow commissioners. So, California has over 300 transit agencies who provide literally trillions of miles of transit service every year. This transit network has the potential to transform how we move around the state while advancing our equity, climate, and economic goals. Yet this enormous network remains an enigma to the average traveler. Since 2017, the California Integrated Travel Project, or CAL-ITP, has sought to make it easier to plan a trip and pay for transit across the state. CAL-ITP has partnered with transit agencies, transit associations, the payments and banking industries, technology platforms, and others to conceive and implement demonstration projects. We have also been developing and providing technical assistance and procurement support to transit agencies big and small. We look forward to working with the Commission to accelerate the rollout of CAL-ITP and to expand the benefits of the project through our shared programs. It is now my pleasure to introduce the manager of the Caltrans Integrated Mobility Program, Gillian Gillette, to give an overview of this exciting project.
Hi there. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Chair Norton and Vice Chair Alvarado and commissioners. Again, my name is Jillian Gillette. Thanks, Kyle, for the introduction. And thank you for the opportunity to address you today with an introduction to the California Integrated Travel Project, CAL-ITP. CAL-ITP is partially funded by a TIRCP grant through this commission and is part of the California Integrated Mobility Program at Caltrans, which I manage. The project took off in earnest in January 2019 and undertook 1.5 years of research and analysis of transportation providers and of the private sector involved in mobility data and in payments. Our research is published at calitp.org. Next slide, please. Our primary goals are to make it easy to find and pay for transportation services for everyone in California. We also work to drive down the costs and increase opportunities for the over 350 transportation services in California through methods such as leveraging the buying power of the state of California. And we are working hard to do all of these things because climate change is all around us and systems thinking is needed now more than ever. Next slide, please. During our initial research and analysis, we found three main challenging areas where we believe that we can add value for everyone. First, existing travel information is not complete and the quality of data is not reliable for the customer. Second, transit operators tend to develop their own payment system if they can afford to, and only cash is interoperable everywhere in the United States. Again, there are over 300 transportation services in California. And finally, each transportation provider generally develops their own eligibility verification methods to provide their own discounts, requiring customers to apply at each service and generally in person, often at considerable administrative expense to the transportation service. Next slide, please. In response, we are working on three initiatives, which I will briefly lay out in the next slides. Next slide, please. We work to advance the Real-Time General Transit Feed Specification, or GTFS, which is the global standard in mobility data. This is a data standard that allows transportation services to publish their schedules and certain geospatial information in a format that software developers can use to build maps and other trip planning applications, like Google and Apple Maps. Next slide, please. Second, we work to introduce open loop payment bank cards, which is the global standard in payments. This opens transit up to the payment method already familiar to anyone who has a debit or credit card or mobile wallet anywhere in the world. Next slide, please. And finally, we work to demonstrate and advance simple online eligibility verification. And this will open the door to policy-based discounts via fare capping for the many transit riders who can't afford the thousands of annual, monthly, or even weekly passes offered in California today. Next slide, please. If I may, I'd like to show a brief movie of how some of the pieces of CAL-ITP fit together using standard tools that are in the pockets of most Americans. I'll be demonstrating a trip from my apartment here in San Francisco to Samtrans Caltrain in San Mateo County. You will see that Google Maps presents me with multiple options to make my trip on transit, and that the trip price is presented at the bottom of the trip, so I can easily see what the trip will cost me, just like buying a cup of coffee. If you could present the movie, please.
Time to visit my colleagues at Samtrans in San Carlos. Let's take a trip on transit using Google Maps. Wonder how much it costs.
Oh, look, the point of sale terminal on my bus takes Visa and MasterCard. I wonder if it takes Square debit cards.
Oh, look, it's a point of sale terminal. It takes Visa and MasterCard here on my bus. Let's see if it takes Apple Pay. Cool.
Oh look, this point of sale terminal on my bus takes Visa and MasterCard. I wonder if it'll take my Apple Pay.
Terrific. Thank you so much for showing the movie. So we are on the cusp of demonstrating CalITP through a partnership with Monterey Salinas Transit District, Visa, Square, and others. And we will announce additional demonstrations in the next few weeks. And we're working with transit operators all over California to offer them technical assistance regarding the 3 initiatives in this presentation. Our website is calitp.org, and our team email address is calitp@dot.ca.gov. I would be honored if you have any questions or comments, and apologize that my webcam seems not to work. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Jillian, and thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes our presentation.
Well, that's great. I have a couple questions, and I see that there's no public comment. One of the most important things that you can do, looping this all in, is, especially as we're looking at the equity issues, is maybe addressing some of the Byzantine issues related to low-income people trying to pay fares, but having a really big administrative hurdle to do so. Will this help us to maybe do some standardizing for low-income fares and maybe even move to no cost or much more low cost, but without those administrative hurdles that make it so hard to use transit and qualify for some of these programs?
Absolutely. That's the core of the program. There is a fantastic global payment system. It's the bank card system that we are all familiar with, and it's now going into the mobile universe with systems such as Apple Pay and Google Pay. It works quite well. There's been a problem for a long time in the United States in that that system hasn't applied to, very well to about 30% of the population because there's some combination of under or unbanked, and this was before COVID. So the system works, it's just that not everyone has access to it. And when you're attacking a problem like this at the size of the state of California, you're in a much different position than the transit industry, which heretofore has really had to invent its own payment system, which is why you see so many different versions across the state of California, or it's sort of assumed that the way you pay for transit is through cash. And, transit operators, the way their cash fare box, which sits fewer than 2 feet from the operator, the driver of the bus, comes bolted to the bus. It is assumed that that's how people pay for transit. So this is not okay. It's not, it wasn't great before, and now it's also not safe. So this is the core of the program, is to make sure that everybody has a great digital way to pay.
That's fantastic. I see that our executive director, Mitch Weiss, has some comments, and I have one more before we end, but this is very fascinating. Thank you. Mitch?
Thank you.
Well, I think this is great what you guys are working towards. Can you provide a little more about, so what are you doing to get transit agencies there? Is it technical assistance? Is it more of a consulting or coordination? What exactly are you doing to get us from here to there?
Sure. So it's a difficult question to ask because we have, again, over 300 transit agencies and everybody does everything differently, right? So one has to attack this as a system. So we're doing multiple things. Fundamentally, one of the values that the state of California can offer is opening up the things that it buys to local agencies. So a great example would be the ePay system at the Department of General Services. So if you are a state agency and you want to accept debit or credit cards, you sign on to a contract that was negotiated by the Department of General Services for payment processing, right? And it's very, very low cost because the state is quite large. When that system was opened, the legislature extended that contract and that function of the Department of General Services to local agencies. And so heretofore, before CalITP, transit operators were not really eligible, or it was really unclear that transit operators, that mass transit transactions could be processed this way. And now it is clear. So transit operators, which previously were individually if they wanted to accept bank and credit cards, they had to individually negotiate for a teeny tiny market share, and they were paying substantial costs, much larger than what the state can offer. So that's a great example of us just simply using an administrative function to massively lower the cost. Another example would be providing technical assistance through Kyle's division at the Division of Rail and Mass Transit. When transit operators work with us on grant programs, it's a great opportunity to reach out to them and ask them, to assess their service, to see if they're compliant with the general transit speed specification. We run a piece of software on their feed, and we see if their service is visible in Google Maps. And if it's not, we talk to them about that and see how we can help. So we provide basic information and training, and then we are working with the Department of General Services to increase the numbers of buys of equipment and services and make those available to local operators. So those are 2 or 3 different examples of the kinds of things that we are doing with CalITP.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, this is great. My follow-up question is that as we're looking at pre-tax dollars to federal programs to encourage more people to use a market basket of transit and other sources other than single occupant vehicles, is this going to help us as we go and start looking at the packages of transportation opportunities that could qualify because they could have a single payment, so that this was your transportation allowance, and then have more things qualify like microtransit,
absolutely,
EV bikes, etc.?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the value of, look, every sector of the global economy uses the same payment system, which is the bank rails, except for American Transit. So today, the way that you pay for those services is through, digital alternatives like bank and credit cards, and that is not the case with transit. So in one quick move, by encouraging and supporting transit to move onto the merchant rails and to become a merchant and to actively participate in merchant services being built for transit, just as merchant services have been built for the other portions of the global economy, we should actively, through the state of California, be engaging in those conversations. What are the merchant services? What is the interoperability? What is the integration of services that we want, so that it is just like buying a cup of coffee?
And further to your question, I think the opportunities go beyond transportation to other government services and funds provided to Californians. So we're certainly looking into those opportunities.
Absolutely. The state is involved in payments in several policy areas. And when you look at my neighbors in the Mission District in San Francisco have a Pokemon of benefits in their wallets, because we mean very well, but we tend to give people different pieces of plastic or pieces of paper that represent a benefit. And the risk for those customers of ours is that if they lose their wallet, it could take them years to get those benefits back. Whereas you and I, and most of the people probably on this meeting today, if our wallet is stolen, we curse, and then we call an 800 number and we are reissued our account, or, right? That needs to be the same experience for everyone.
That's great. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. Appreciate your time.
Likewise. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
We look forward to following up with you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'd like to go to item 15, Paul Golzewski for the state and federal legislative matters.
Commissioners, tab 15 is an action item to accept the staff report on state legislation in attachment A. The staff report includes 9 bills being monitored. We expect to add more bills to this list in the coming weeks as new legislation may be introduced up until February 19th. Staff is not recommending the Commission adopt a position on any of the bills in the staff report at this time. Also, I know the federal COVID relief funds were already mentioned in several previous items, so I won't go over this issue again, except to reiterate that Commission staff, in coordination with Caltrans, will soon use the workshop process to discuss the distribution of these funds with agencies and stakeholders. I would emphasize that no decisions have been made on the distribution of the funds yet. We only very recently received the FHWA apportionment notice, and as Vince Mamamo mentioned, further FHWA guidance is still pending, which we still need to see. That concludes my report, and staff recommends you approve this item.
Wonderful. Are there any questions from commissioners? I see that there are no public comment. Could we get a motion on this item?
Move.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Berg. Do we have a second?
Second, Commissioner Eager.
Okay, thank you. Douglas, could you please read the roll?
Commissioner Alvarado,
Yes.
Commissioner Burke,
Aye.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Eager,
Aye.
Commissioner Guardino, Commissioner Guardino,
I think he's having sound issues.
Commissioner Inman, Commissioner Inman, Commissioner Kehoe,
Aye.
Commissioner Liu,
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez,
Aye.
Commissioner Tavaloni,
Aye.
Chair Norton.
Aye.
Chair, the item is approved.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, I seconded by mistake.
No, you moved the item and Commissioner Eager seconded it.
I moved it by mistake. I wasn't supposed to.
It's fine. Very
I'm
timely.
sorry, Mom.
Thank you. We're going to move on to item 16, budget and allocation capacity. Paul and Keith, are you ready for us?
Yep. Commissioners, tab 16 is an information item on budget and allocation capacity that Keith Duncan from the Caltrans Division of Budgets will present. Keith?
Keith, we
There we
don't
go.
have your audio. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I apologize for that. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. My name is Keith Duncan with Caltrans Division of Budgets, and today I have the honor to provide you the budget and allocation capacity update. Next slide, please. To begin, through December, the Commission has allocated about $2.9 billion of the total available $7 billion allocation capacity across all transportation programs. A couple of the highlighted programs, still SHOP is leading the pack at about 60% allocated through December. The STIP is about 43%, and the Solution for Congested Corridors program is about 50% allocated. Based on today's agenda, is about $500 million worth of projects to be allocated. But even with that, even with that, we're still about 41% through December allocated. So it is a bit lower than we would like to see at this point in time. But in speaking with many of the program managers within Caltrans, they do anticipate their full program of projects to come forward later this fiscal year. So we can anticipate a busy third and fourth quarter, as seems to be historical over the last several fiscal years. Next slide, please. For this next slide, we wanted to share just how, given that we're halfway through this fiscal year, wanted to just share how this fiscal year compared to prior fiscal years when it comes to allocation capacity percent. The common measure of unit is percent allocated as we progress through the fiscal year. So the vertical axes or the y-axis is percent allocated. And as you can see, starting from the left to the right, that's just showing how we allocate, how the progress for allocation throughout the fiscal year. As you can tell by the number of lines there, the reddish orange line represents the 17-18 fiscal year, which happens to be the first year the SB1 revenue started to come in. The revenue started to come in mid-year, so as you can see in looking at that, the slope of that line, it started to flatten in December, but then started to increase. The next line down is the blue line, which represents the 18-19 year, which is the first full year of funding from the SB1 passage. And then you can see kind of a commingling of lines. The full yellow line, yellowish line there, represents last fiscal year, the 1920 fiscal year. As you recall, we started the fiscal year pre-pandemic, and then the pandemic and the stay-at-home orders began in March. You can see the next line, which is the green line, mirrors that. So you can see that even during this pandemic time, we are maintaining similar progress when it comes to the allocation capacity percent as prior fiscal year. As you can see over the last few years, from March through the month of June, we'll see the allocation, the amount being allocated increases quite a bit. So, and as mentioned in the previous slide, based on Caltrans program manager feedback, we can anticipate that trend to continue. Next slide, please. As has been provided at previous commission meetings, we wanted to share a revenue update. The slide before you here, you can see what we've done is this chart compares the enacted budget projections, the Department of Finance projections that were provided during the May revise to actual revenue received midway point through the year, with the exception of gasoline excise tax, where you can see we're still roughly about 6% below the straight line average. Diesel excise, weight fee, diesel sales tax, as well as transportation and road improvement fee revenues is higher than anticipated. Bottom line, we're just slightly above 1% above what was projected in the May revise. But again, the gasoline excise tax, the projection model did assume that we would start the fiscal year a little lower in gasoline consumption and then progressively increase as we went through the fiscal year. But unfortunately, we're still maintaining that 6% below what the projection model had indicated. Next slide, please. Just a couple weeks ago, the governor released, Governor Newsom released his proposed budget for the upcoming 2021-22 fiscal year. Included in that budget release was also a revised projection across all the transportation revenue sources. Included, as you can see on the slide here, you can see as you follow along the gasoline excise tax, given the recent trends of the first 6 months of the fiscal year being below what was projected, the Department of Finance has actually reduced what is being projected for gasoline excise tax over this 2-year period, which includes the rest of this fiscal year and next fiscal year. You can see that they've reduced the overall projection by about 2% each year when it comes to gasoline and excise tax. And as indicated on the prior slide, diesel excise, weight fee, diesel sales, and transportation and road improvement fee, were those revenues increasing a little bit higher given the prior 6 months. They've also increased those revenue projections. Just to note, based on May revise information, which was the initial reduced pandemic-related revenues for the 21 and 22 fiscal years, we were estimating that we would be loss reduction equate to about $1.9 billion of lost revenue across the 5 sources. Now, with these revised projections, we're only looking at about a $1.5 billion. I say only in jest, knowing that $1.5 billion is still a lot of funding that we still need to try to make up because as a result of the pandemic. But that $400 million reduction in the reduced revenues does help on the financial outlook when it comes to making sure that we can fully fund all of our transportation programs.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. To continue on, in addition to the revised transportation revenue data, the governor also included the proposed budget for Caltrans for this upcoming fiscal year. In total, Caltrans' proposed budget is about $14.6 billion and is budgeted for a little less than 20,670 positions for our statewide departmental operations. The department's budget can be separated into, I guess, three different categories. First being state operations. This funds departmental operations statewide. That includes maintaining the highway system, which includes our maintenance and operations activities, our project delivery support, as well as our planning and modal operations and various administrative support areas. This also includes operating expense funding for our equipment, our facilities, as well as all of our contract funding, including our maintenance contracts and our major maintenance project funding. The next category, local assistance, a little over $4 billion. Those funds are budgeted or received by Caltrans, but these are funds that are subvented to our local agency partners for their respective transportation projects and transportation-related needs. And the third category there on the slide represents capital outlay, a little over $5.3 billion. This is funding for our construction contracts, as well as our right-of-way acquisition activities for the upcoming fiscal year. The main point we want to share in just general overview when it comes to this proposed budget, Caltrans, similar to what we did this fiscal year, as we look into next fiscal year, Caltrans intends to fully fund all of our transportation programs at the pre-pandemic level at 2020 fund estimate. So there won't be any reduction. So we still are encouraging the full funding as well as full delivery of all the program of projects for the upcoming fiscal year. Next slide, please. So for this slide, we wanted to kind of show a different display of the budget, of the proposed budget for Caltrans of the $14.6 billion as a pie chart. Basically, this is just displaying our budget based on our Caltrans functions. There on the right-hand side, I'll say the lighter blue represents almost 50% of our overall budget is for capital projects as well as our Caltrans project delivery support operations. There on the bottom, slight right, is a little over 20% of our budget is to support our local assistance activities and the subvention of local funds to our local transportation partners. As you slide a little further up there on the left, the orange, about 16% of our overall budget is for our maintenance and operations and equipment activities. A little bit higher in the green represents about 12% for our mass transit and rail functions. And then there at the top, the two smaller pieces, which totals a little less than 4%, is for our planning, our program development, as well as our various administrative support operations from throughout the state. So we just wanted to share just a different display when it comes to our overall budget by our Caltrans functions. Next slide, please. For this next slide, we wanted to provide a quick update regarding the Federal Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2021. I know Director Omashakin, as well as Mr. Mamano, as well as Paul in the previous agenda item had already touched on, so I won't get into too much. The main takeaway is that California did receive our apportionment notice, or we did receive apportionment notice last week, so Caltrans is expecting to get about California is expected to get about $912 million, and the decision for distribution will be coming soon. Next slide, please. So this next slide, I wanted to just share just a schedule or calendar of upcoming events. Immediately following this agenda item, I'll have the opportunity to share the 2020-22 fund estimate development overview. As we look forward to the March meeting, as a continuation of that fund estimate development process, we'll be presenting to you the fund estimate draft assumptions for your consideration. As we go into April, typically this is a product that we in Caltrans budgets are quite fond of. This is when we release our 2021-22 California Transportation Financing Package, as well as what we refer to as the infamous Chart C. The intent of this package is to kind of, we know the use of transportation revenue and how the funds are used can be quite complicated. So this package is intended to try to remove the curtain, has reference to the Wizard of Oz, to try to help everyone better understand how these revenues come in and how they are used, both according to statute as well as based on commission activities. And then later in May, as a continuation of the budget release process, when the governor releases his budget in January, we then spend the next couple months for the state legislature to go through the deliberative process in reviewing the budget and holding hearings. And then later in May, the governor, based on that feedback, will then provide his May revise or his revised proposed budget for the upcoming fiscal year. So we'll be looking forward to that. Next slide, please. With that, I'd like to thank CTC staff as well as Caltrans financial programming staff for their help with today's presentation, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. We have no public comment. Commissioners, do you have any questions? Seeing none, let's move on to item 17.
Okay, thank you. This is
tab 17 is an action item. Keith Duncan will provide an overview of the fund estimate process and request approval of this schedule for adoption. Commission staff concur with the schedule proposed by Caltrans and recommend approval. And with that, I'll let Keith present it.
Thank you, Paul. Again, good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. Keith Duncan, Caltrans Division of Budgets, and today I'll be sharing the overview of the development process for the 2022 STIP fund estimate. Next slide, please. So what is the fund estimate? To be quite brief, the STIP fund estimate is a biennial forecast of all resources available for the next 5-year period and establishes the program funding levels for both the STIP, the State Transportation Improvement Program, and the SHOP, the State Highway Operation and Protection Program. The fund estimate is required by statute. It is required to be prepared biannually or every 2 years. To be more specific, it's expected to be prepared every odd-numbered year. And again, it provides specific programming capacity for both the STIP and the SHOP. The fund estimate development process is intended to be a collaborative effort with both Caltrans and Commission. The Commission in August Caltrans will be recommending Commission to adopt the fund estimate. So with that, obviously we will be working closely with Commission staff prior to each Commission meeting over the next several months as we prepare our presentation to present each step in the process for developing the 2022 fund estimate. The role of the Transportation Commission, the role of the CTC, is to provide guidance related to the development of the fund estimate, as well as it's required in statute or identified in statute. The Commission would be adopting the fund estimate in August for each odd-numbered year, and then when it comes to the upcoming STIP, which is to be presented and adopted by the Commission every even-numbered year, the STIP is to be consistent with the adopted fund estimate. So that's kind of a general layout of what the role that you could be looking forward to over the next several months. Next slide, please. When it comes to the fund estimate, there are statutory deadlines identified in government code when it comes to development of the fund estimate. So we wanted to touch on 3 of them specifically. The first is required by statute. The draft fund estimate is due to the Commission from Caltrans by July 15th. As you may recall, or as you may know, there is not typically a Commission meeting scheduled in the month of July. So the the previous scheduled meeting in the month of June is when the department plans to present the draft fund estimate to you for your consideration. The next date identified in statute is August 15th. Government code requires the Commission to adopt the fund estimate by August 15th. One of the allowances when it comes to that government code, there is an associated government code that does allow the Commission to delay the adoption of the fund estimate by up to 90 days. Given that the regularly scheduled Commission meeting does fall just a couple days after the August 15th meeting, that is, as I'll touch on later in this presentation, that's part of why we'll be recommending the Commission to adopt a resolution for the delay so that we don't have to necessarily move up the adoption to a sooner date. We want to be very deliberate in making sure that we take all the necessary time to take the necessary steps to develop a strong fund estimate. Next slide, please. For this next slide, this table shows the overlap between consecutive fund estimates. The fund estimate is intended to cover a 5-year period, and it does take into account a year of development or a base year when it comes to the consideration of the periods in front of you. As noted, you can see how the 5-year period from a prior fund estimate, such as the 2018, as it carries over the 2020 fund estimate, the last 3 years of the prior fund estimate, and we add 2 years for the next fund. The main intention of the there's some background, so I apologize for that. The main intention of being able to show this, as you see in the 2022 fund estimate there, or at the bottom in kind of the salmon color, it does take into account information that was included in the 2018 fund estimate as well as the 2020 fund estimate. What this process allows us to do is to be able to look back at the successes that we may have been able to incorporate in prior fund estimates, as well as opportunities to maybe fix or repair anything that we may have been off base a little bit with. So we just wanted to share how each fund estimate is directly related as we present a biannual fund estimate process. Next slide, please. As we'll touch on here in a moment, assumptions play a critical role in the development of this forecasting model. But in addition to those assumptions, there are specific statutory guidance that we need to take into account when it comes to the development of the fund estimate. When it comes to revenues, the revenue data that we use must be based on current revenue structure and projections for future revenues. So we know that through the passage of SB1, there's set excise tax rates with annual inflationary increases that will be taken into account. So we'll make sure that those are built into this. If there is any legislation, either at the federal or state level, that is being deliberated but not yet enacted or passed, we would not necessarily be able to take that into account when it comes to projecting upcoming revenues. So one of the items when it comes to the revenues, obviously, as Mr. Mamano had already mentioned, the FAST Act was extended another year. So there is a potential to either for Congress to either extend the FAST Act another year or potentially have a new Transportation Act in place. So we'll definitely be looking closely at the federal level to see if that is maybe passed prior to the fund estimate adoption period, so we can take those numbers into account and trying to make sure we have the most accurate possible allocation capacity calculations. When it comes to projecting available expenditures, that is, as identified in statute, these are costs that are available, costs that revenue must be applied to, and are typically based on the current budgets. So when it does come to the expenditures, we'll be taking into account the current enacted budget. So by the July 1st timeframe, we will be in the 21-22 fiscal year. So the majority of our expenditures will be based on that enacted budget at that time. Next slide, please. So the general idea behind the fund estimate, it follows a cash flow methodology. It does take into consideration what cash is on hand at the beginning of the period, what cash will be received or revenues, what will be spent for Caltrans and transportation operations and programs, as well as what will be spent for previously programmed projects. And as you take those beginning balance, add revenue, minus the expected expenditures and commitments, what's left is the available resources to be programmed for future projects. So to be a little more specific, when it comes to the beginning balance that will be used for the 2022 fund estimate, we will be using the cash balance or the beginning balance as of July 1st of 2021. When it comes to the anticipated revenues, as previously mentioned, we did receive most recent state revenue information as part of the January budget release. We do anticipate the next revenue update to be provided as part of the May revise process. So those most recent state revenue numbers will be included in the 2022 fund estimate process, as well as any federal revenue information that may be available at that time. We'll also take into account the anticipated expenditures, either identified in statute or identified in the governor's budget, as well as the last item in red, the existing program commitments. These are program projects that have just not yet been allocated by the commission. They're just going to be allocated in the later years for the respective programs. So those will all be taken into account. One of the critical pieces to make sure we note, the assumptions about revenue and expenses are key for a successful fund estimate. So we will be working very closely with commission staff prior to the presentation of the draft assumptions at the upcoming March meeting, as well as prior to the presentation of the final assumptions that we will be recommending your approval at the May meeting. Next slide, please. So for a brief overview of the upcoming timeline, This table is just intended to provide some basic dates on when Caltrans plans to present relevant topics related to the 2022 fund estimate. In March, Caltrans, as previously mentioned, will be presenting our draft assumptions, which are the basis of forecasts displayed in the 2022 fund estimate. And obviously, by presenting draft assumptions to you in March, that provides you the full opportunity to provide as much input and feedback as part of the entire process. As previously mentioned, this is going to be collaborative, so we want to make sure we're working closely with your commission staff as well as all commissioners as we solidify the 2022 fund estimate. At the May meeting, we plan to recommend for your approval of the final fund estimate assumptions. And while Caltrans will be asking the commission to approve the assumptions at the May meeting, we also know that the May revise, the governor's revised budget for proposed budget for the upcoming fiscal year, should be released about that same time. So if the release of the May revise, if that May revise document contains any information that may require those assumptions to be revised, we would report directly back to you at the upcoming June meeting, so you're fully aware of any changes that may need to be taken into account. At the June commission meeting, we'll be presenting you the draft 2022 fund estimate at that time, and then at the August meeting, we'll be presenting or recommending the commission to adopt the final fund estimate. In addition to this presentation, the department is seeking for the commission to adopt a resolution so we can delay the adoption of the fund estimate just a couple days, being that the statute requires August 15th for the fund estimate to be adopted, not scheduling a special meeting or trying to rush the calendar through by delaying it just a few days for the August meeting to be able to give us enough time so the commission can adopt it within statute requirements. Next slide, please. And with that, again, I want to thank CTC staff and Caltrans financial programming team for their help with today's presentation, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Well, thank you so very much. We have no public comments, but we do have a question from one of our commissioners, Commissioner Martinez.
Thank you, Chairwoman Norton. Just very quickly, as we move towards the next round of STIP guidelines, I'm assuming, and maybe I'm wrong, but will that reflect the state goals as it pertains to climate action for transportation?
I would assume so. I apologize, I'm not part of this. When it comes to the STIP fund estimate, it's primarily just looking at the financial information, but I'd be happy to check in with the Caltrans team to be able to confirm that answer for you.
Fantastic. And then the second question, as it pertains to that, and if that is going to be the case, is there a way that we can work a little earlier to engage our regional agencies and county commissions? I think that's going to be very important as we move towards talking about this new STIP and wanting to make sure that we engage as early as we possibly can. And just finally, you know, I'm going on my 6th month. So as we move forward, you did indicate a little bit about the role of the of us commissioners and how you want us to be engaged. Just wanting to make sure early on that what that process is going to look like, because this is where we are able to provide some input is in these kinds of guidelines. And so I'm wanting to make sure that we're able to do so in a timely fashion, as well as our partners.
Yes, Commissioner, we will work directly with commission staff to make sure that you're aware of everything coming forward prior to each meeting, as well as to make sure that we get your feedback and provide you enough opportunity to provide as much input and feedback as you would like to be as part of the process. And I see Executive Director White.
The STIP guidelines are a commission process, not a Caltrans process. So we will be undertaking workshops in the near future to start those discussions with our partners.
Thank you.
Fantastic. I believe without any other questions, we do need to take an action for the resolution on the schedule adoption. If we could accept a motion.
Motion to
Davis.
Thank you.
Second
Thank you very much. Wonderful. Thank you. And Douglas, could you please read the roll?
Madam Chair, can you please confirm who made the motion and who the second was? We heard a lot of
I
jumbling.
heard Davis and Martinez as the second. Davis made the motion and Martinez, but even though Lou was originally slated to.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Alvarado?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Burke?
Aye.
Commissioner Davis?
Aye.
Commissioner Eager?
Aye.
Commissioner Guardino? Commissioner Inman?
Aye.
Commissioner Kehoe?
Aye.
Commissioner Liu?
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez?
Aye.
Commissioner Tavaloni?
Aye.
Chair Norton?
Aye.
Chair, the motion is approved.
Thank you very much. With that, we're going to take a short 10-minute break and reconvene at 3:40. We have some wonderful items that we have some questions about and great input, but we'd like to take a break right before that. So we'll see you back at 3:40.